Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Stay Safe with Will and Jav. Today I'm going to talk about risk assessment, or basic risk assessment. Risk assessment can be a hugely complex area, however, we need to start from a basic level, and in order to do that we thought that it would be a really good idea to do a quick video on how you would go about a risk assessment. Now you'll hear that there are other parts that need to feed into a risk assessment, like context assessment, and we'll cover that in a video. But today I'm going to go through the basic way of assessing hazards and risks for activities. Firstly, you need to consider the activity or the set of activities that you or your staff or your organisation is going to do. Secondly, you then need to look at the hazards that present themselves whilst doing that activity. Thirdly, you need to look at the likelihood of harm. Fourthly, you need to look at the severity of the harm, which then gives you your risk score, and then you can look at control measures for controlling the risk and bringing down the risk score or the risk level. I talked about the likelihood of harm first, and how do you assess that? So we've split that for the purposes of this into low, medium and high. So likelihood of it being low, it means unlikely it will happen. Medium likelihood means it's possible that it will happen, and high means it's extremely likely that it's going to happen or it will happen and you know it. The other part is severity of harm. So again, low, medium and high. Low means that the severity is actually not going to be that bad. It's going to have little impact on you or your organisation or your staff. Medium is more significant. It could be something that causes temporary business closure or some injury to staff or some specialist attention. And finally, high is where you're looking at really serious severity. So that could be something that results in death, closure or stopping of services, which are things that you want to avoid. And what you can see when you match the likelihood against severity is a very basic risk matrix, which goes from green of it being very low in both cases to high where it's in both cases. And you can see on this small basic table how that works out. So once you've actually looked at that table, you can then look at any activity in the hazard and measure these. So I'm going to look at this basic risk assessment table, and I've taken an example of taking myself on public transport to work. So there are two key hazards that I've focused on there. The first hazard is coronavirus infection. So at the moment where I live, the likelihood of that happening is medium. That's because some people are being more careful, there are less people around on the public transport because of the lockdown, but it's still more than low. The severity of getting coronavirus is extreme. I could die from it. So that's given an overall risk score of high. So what I want to do is be bringing down the likelihood even further, and the points that I've put in there are wearing a face mask, carrying and using hand sanitizer, travelling off peak, staying away from people or not mixing with people when I'm on the public transport, and not congregating at doors just before I'm about to get off or when the vehicle stops. The next hazard that might come from travelling on public transport could be being involved in a confrontation or theft. So in actual fact I travel on quite pleasant lines, so the likelihood of coming across somebody who's going to do this to me at the times that I travel is very low. The severity, however, would be high. Being confronted or being involved in a confrontation or having my gear and equipment stolen could result in serious disruption and harm to me. So that actually gives a low likelihood versus a high severity. Turns out that gives a risk score of medium. So what are the control measures that I would use to reduce that risk? Well, I'm going to travel in daylight hours, avoid when people who might want to be involved in confrontations generally do travel outside of those hours, taking public transport routes that I'm familiar with, sitting close to an exit point or near to a driver if I need to get out or get help quickly, avoiding sitting next to or around suspicious looking characters, carrying a mobile with me, and not having any valuables on show. You can see that there are different control measures. They are all recorded in the risk assessment, and now I can share that with other people and say, these are the risks that I'm aware of, this is the risk score, but I'm going to bring that down by introducing these control measures and following these control measures. So that's the end of the basic risk assessment. You can build on this, you can make it hugely complex, but what I would suggest is starting with 1 or 2 activities and going from there. And of course you can get in touch with us and ask us questions. We'd be delighted to help talk through risk assessments more with you and all of the topics around that go there. It does build into other topics around security, and we'll cover off those in future videos.